Dear daughter, I'm writing this because love can have a dark side, and I wish I had realized it sooner. Jealousy can disguise itself as affection, but it's a trap. It was just an ordinary night. We were together at a bar, laughing. The music played softly in the background, and everything seemed perfect. Then, he looked to the side, where a friend of mine was chatting with a guy. The shift was subtle, but palpable. He tensed up. The smile disappeared, and the atmosphere grew heavy, as if someone had pulled the air out of the room. I remembered what I had read about jealousy, but it was more than that. It was his silence, the way he started observing me, as if I were under a microscope. I should have felt loved, but the only thing I felt was the weight of obligation. That's when I realized it wasn't love. It was control, a silent test to measure my loyalty, a territorial claim disguised as concern. The sign? When his gaze changes. When conversation becomes a game of questions and answers, where you must justify every move. The translation of this? Love turns into possession. The space that should belong to you becomes a marked territory. And ultimately, the limit. Never be afraid to assert your freedom. Say clearly, I am more than what you want to control. If you remember only one thing, let it be this. Jealousy is not love. It's a prison. I watched the scene unfold, and the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing second. He was so focused on my friend's conversation that he seemed oblivious to how his attitude was affecting me. The smile that once lit up his face morphed into a mask of distrust. We were in a place that should feel light, but that moment grew heavy. I wished I could turn off my heart and ignore what was happening, but something inside me screamed for me to pay attention. It wasn't just jealousy. It was the possessiveness lurking beneath the surface. The way he couldn't handle the idea that someone might want to talk to a woman without it threatening something between us. That night, the laughter and music became a distant echo. All I wanted was a bit of freedom, but I was trapped in a maze of someone else's insecurities. His gaze turned into an invisible pressure, as if I were taking a test where every answer had to be perfect. You don't mind, right? He said, breaking the silence, but his voice sounded more like a disguised accusation. And me? I wasn't sure what he wanted to hear. I smiled, trying to dissipate the tension, but the truth was I was scared. Scared of being misinterpreted, of losing what we had built, even though I was starting to realize that this built wasn't what I truly desired. The background music began to sound like a storm, the rhythms transforming into the beats of an anxious heart. I remembered earlier moments when he had made me feel special. But now, everything felt like a responsibility, an emotional debt I didn't know when I had incurred. And that debt was growing, blooming into a garden of suffocating expectations. Every time I tried to be free, there was a weight waiting to pull me back. That's when I started to analyze the situation. What did it really mean to be with someone like this? The question spun relentlessly in my mind. Was it love, or was it something much darker? A relationship based on mutual admiration, or the expectation of control? The signs were right there in front of me, yet I hesitated. It's just a phase, I thought. He'll understand. But time passed, and every new situation only reinforced the pattern. Small outings with friends were accompanied by messages full of questions, the same issues that shaped my freedom in loyalty products. One night, while revisiting those thoughts, I noticed a crucial detail. His actions didn't come from a place of love, but from a desire for security. And the more I tried to prove myself, the more I lost myself. The emptiness I filled with silent promises did nothing but dig a deeper grave for my own authenticity. When I finally found the courage to talk about it, the conversation was a battle. He argued that jealousy was an expression of love, that he cared because he was worried about me. But the truth I felt behind his words was that he wanted to shape, control, and dominate. And I looked at him, trying to find the eyes that once sparkled with affection, and said, "This is not what I want. I am more than an extension of your desire to control." The pause was electrically tense. The wind coming through the window seemed to carry away all the uncertainty between us. He fell silent, and in that silence, I realized something. If this were truly a healthy love, he would have made an effort to understand, to see my pain, to acknowledge the space I needed. His presence was a prison disguised as affection, and fear swept over me once again. The fear of losing what I knew, what had been comfortable, even if it was unsustainable. However, that fear mingled with a growing sense of determination. The flame of my freedom was beginning to resurface, even under the pressure of that gaze. Because deep down, I knew that true love did not require sacrifices of this nature. True love doesn't shrink. As the nights went by, my awareness of the situation became sharper. I started to notice the little details that had previously gone unnoticed. He often asked me questions that seemed innocent, but carried a weight. Where have you been? Who were you talking to? Each question was a trap, designed to put me in a defensive position where I felt I had to justify my choices, as if my decisions were somehow delegated to him. And so, life became a painful dance. I was always trying to maintain a balance between being myself and meeting his expectations. But the truth is, with each passing day, I was losing myself more and more in an edited version of who I really was. The woman he wanted wasn't the real me, but a shadow of her. And this realization led me to a powerful awakening. Love shouldn't be a battleground. When every choice turns into a complicated negotiation filled with rules, what's really at stake is the essence of what it means to love another human being. It's an open dialogue, not a courtroom. This turning point, this clarity, began to pave the way for a new strength within me. After all, I had the right to exist fully, without apologies on the tip of my tongue. The desire to control may disguise itself as affection, but I was no longer willing to live that way. One day, while we were together again, I decided it was time to confront this situation once and for all. I looked into his eyes, and the firmness in my voice surprised even me. I love you, but I need my freedom. I don't want you to be afraid of losing me because that's not love. Love doesn't feel like a prison. I am stronger than you think, and I need you to see that. The ensuing silence was heavy, laden with unspoken emotions. I looked at him, hoping to see a trace of understanding, but instead what I saw was a reflection of his own fears manifesting. He looked lost, as if he were standing at the edge of an abyss. And in that moment of vulnerability, I realized that love shouldn't be based on control tactics or power games. The path ahead would be difficult. Sometimes I wondered if I could withstand the pressure of returning to what I knew. However, the idea of being free was a light that guided me, and so, while the music played softly in the background, I remembered what truly mattered. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was also defining what it would mean to love and be loved. This understanding deepened as I walked away from that situation. And even though the journey was filled with uncertainties, we knew that true love allows both partners to be whole, free, and respected. And that, my daughter, is a lesson worth fighting for. The music in the background became a distant echo, each note seeming to remind me that there was a life beyond that emotional prison. My breath began to harmonize with the rhythm of a new reality. His silence felt as heavy as my doubts, but now I was determined not to lose myself again. As I looked at him, I realized that his insecurities weren't just about me. They were about him, his own flaws and fears. Vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was the true essence of love. That night, when everything became clear, something inside me was breaking and moving forward. And then, an unexpected memory surfaced. A sunny afternoon in the park, where we sat on the cool grass, laughing as if the world couldn't touch us. He had told me about his dreams, his childhood, the little fears that accompanied him. Back then, I envisioned a future full of possibilities, where we could both grow together without limits. But now, the shadows of jealousy and possessiveness were distorting that beautiful past. I had convinced myself that I could be his savior, the woman who would heal his insecurities with unconditional love. But what I really needed to understand was that love isn't a remedy. It's not a panacea that heals deep emotional wounds. On the contrary, true love is a space where both can heal on their own, side by side, without feeling the need to control or smother each other. Anger grew within me like a flame. I wasn't just disappointed, I was furious. Furious for allowing him to shape my reality, for putting aside my essence to fit perfectly into his vision of love. Meanwhile, his gaze, which once reflected affection, now seemed filled with doubt, and that gave me strength. You need to understand that I'm not here to be your emotional security, I said, each word pulsing with determination. Love shouldn't feel like a transaction. I don't want to trade my freedom for attention. He hesitated, as if my words had cut an invisible bond that held us together. Then, in a moment of vulnerability, his eyes filled with a genuine sadness that I couldn't quite identify. He wasn't just scared of losing me. He was terrified of facing his own weaknesses. That was the turning point. Instead of allowing my heart to harden, I felt compassion. Compassion for his pain, for his insecurities. A mature love faces not only joy but also darkness. Look, I'm not here to judge you. We all have our internal battles. But you need to see that your control is not a sign of love. It's a reflection of your own struggle. The air grew heavy between us, but instead of giving up, something inside me began to recognize the value of this conversation. I wanted more than just to end a relationship. I wanted him to see what he was doing to himself. I wanted him to understand that love is not possession, but freedom. So, in that silence, I placed the letter on the table. Somehow we needed to find a new path, a space where both of us could exist without fear. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. It would be a maze of emotions, self-reflection, and perhaps forgiveness. He lowered his head, and the sincerity in his gesture made me hesitate. For someone so certain of his need for control, he showed fragility. "I didn't know I was doing this," he murmured, and his words were filled with a weight I hadn't anticipated. I always felt like I needed to protect what we had. And there was the revelation. The desire to protect can easily transform into the desire to control. This pattern repeated itself in many relationships, not just ours. Love should not be based on fear, but on trust. In that moment, I decided that I needed to establish a new foundation for both of us. "So, let's work on this together," I said. "We can't change the past, but we can decide how we want to move forward. I don't want you to see me as someone to be watched or controlled. I want you to see the woman who loves freedom, authenticity, and truth." He nodded slowly. There was a light of understanding in his eyes, but there was still a long way to go. I knew that old beliefs wouldn't die immediately, but for the first time, there seemed to be a real chance for change. We left the bar, and as we walked under the stars, the pressure in my chest began to dissipate. There was a new energy between us, an opportunity to rewrite the narrative that almost trapped us. Each step represented our willingness to try, not to shape one another, but to grow together, respecting each other's individuality. I know this path requires work. It's easy to fall into old traps. But as long as we keep the dialogue open, as long as we continue to choose each other daily, perhaps we can rediscover what it means to love and be loved in a way that is not a prison, but a refuge. And if one day you find yourself in a situation where possession disguises itself as love, remember, love is lightness. Love is choice. Never let fear dictate your decisions. And if there is silence, may it be a silence of reflection and growth, not a weapon of control. Embrace freedom. Love yourself first. And in doing so, you will be able to love truly.